So what year did you decide to leave the Foreign Service?
I left after 5 years. I came back to Washington, did about a year in intelligence and research on China, and which also included the Chinese relations with the Vietnamese and some of the border crossings and stuff the Americans were doing there. And then I realized I just couldn't go on. The Vietnam War was just crazy, and I actually was invited to lecture up at Dartmouth, and I went up and was trying to present a rational view of it. You know, it was wrong, it was crazy, but that was the policy. But the students weren't having it. They were like, "Why are you doing it? What's your responsibility? You're responsible. You're working for the government." And I couldn't get off the hook, and I realized I can't.
You can't?
I've got to get out of here. I can't do this. I can't stay in and support this war and be part of the consequences of it. So, because it was crazy from the beginning. So.
So how did you even find out that there was a war in Vietnam?
Oh, it was all over the place. You know.
What's your first memory of conflict between?
Was when I guess the Gulf of Tonkin resolution. When the story was that some North Vietnamese patrol boats had fired on an American boat in the waters off North Vietnam, which turned out to be a lie. But then Lyndon Johnson used that story to get a resolution from Congress allowing him to start that war. And he supposedly was supposed to do it on a very small scale, but he got elected by a big landslide in the next year, and he ramped up the war real fast, didn't bother to ask Congress anymore. He just ramped up the war. Because he was not going to be, you know, Harry Truman had been criticized as the president who lost China in American politics, and Eisenhower won because of during the Korean War. And Lyndon Johnson was not going to be the president who lost Vietnam. I mean, Jack Kennedy had started it, our American involvement, but Johnson ramped it up, put troops on the ground, bombed North Vietnam, and then put a lot of troops on the ground, thinking that would get him out of it.
So do you remember any involvement with Vietnam before the Gulf of Tonkin resolution?
No. And there had, well, I knew, for example, when I was in language school studying Chinese, the guys down the hall were studying Vietnamese. They were in the first Vietnamese language class in Army language school to go, and actually they were doing interviews and intelligence work. But that's when I was aware we were sending people into Vietnam, but it wasn't a war. For us at this point, it was like a guerrilla conflict. So,
when you left the Foreign Service, what did you do?
I went to Stanford and enrolled in a program there for a PhD in international politics. I had been part of a group earlier as a member of the Asian Studies Association, which is mostly an academic group, but I'd gone to their convention in Philadelphia, and they were circulating a petition against the war then, and I signed it because it made a lot of sense. I mean, the war was crazy. I knew that from studying Asian history. You know, it just didn't make sense. And so for people to be dying, Vietnamese and Americans being killed because the Americans were too stubborn to honor their commitment to get out, it was crazy. And the history was on the other guy's side anyway. So,
what do you mean the history was on the other guy's side?
Well, the communists stood for something better than what people had already. That was the case in China, I know. What Chinese farmers had before liberation was not as good as what they had after. There's a lot of propaganda around that, and things went bad later on. When Mao got old and things got really crazy around the communes and things. But at the first, it was a better deal, and I knew that the Vietnamese farmers who were under a very similar system of landlords, villages that are dominated by one rich guy, were what the communists brought in was a better idea, a better way of living, and they had most of the farmers on their side. Most of the farmers couldn't wait, as in China, the farmers couldn't wait for the communists to get there and liberate their village. Sometimes they were having uprisings before the communist army got there. So it was true in Vietnam too. And what the communists did was like just give people the training and the weapons they needed to fight their own battles. So this was a losing proposition. We were propping up the wrong people.
So, how did that make you feel while you were still in the Foreign Service?
Terrible. I got out. I wasn't going to support it.
Mm-hmm.
So I went to Stanford to go to graduate school. And I was, by that I was older than most of the graduate students, so
mm-hmm.
I didn't, I wasn't in part of the, until the movement got bigger and more vital, and then I was a part of it. And
what movement?
Of the anti-war movement
mm-hmm.
there. And then came the strike in 1970, the Cambodia strike, when Nixon sent, by this time Nixon was president,
mm-hmm.
and he was trying to get out of the Vietnam War, so he found there were bases in Cambodia from which Vietnamese soldiers were operating. So he sent bombers into Cambodia to bomb those bases, and then he sent a ground force in to invade
mm-hmm.
that part of Cambodia. And it was students began going out on strike all over the country. And then in Ohio,
mm-hmm.
The National Guard came out, and the students were demonstrating, and the National Guard shot 3 or 4 of them. And that was just a shock that went all over the country, that
mm-hmm.
the Americans, part-time soldiers, the National Guard, not a regular army, had shot American students down dead right in the street, and everything went out. So I was part of that, and joined in, and we became part of the group that sent teams out to towns and churches and Rotary clubs, Kiwanis, anything we could speak, any group we could speak to explain what the student strike was about, because people were just getting their news from the television or newspaper,
mm-hmm.
and it made the students look like crazies. But in fact, there was a lot underneath it. So
what was underneath it?
Well, this whole thing about expanding the war,
mm-hmm.
how to get out of the war, stopping the war, stopping
mm-hmm.
all this killing, stopping these needless deaths, getting America out of being the oppressor and back into running our country right here instead of over there. And not killing, kids were, college people, kids your brother's age were being sent over there to die
mm-hmm.
in the mud.
So how did you first get involved with this, with the anti-war movement? Did you just go to Stanford with that in your mind?
Yeah, well,
mm-hmm.
I went there with yes, I went there because I couldn't stand to be in the Foreign Service. I think I told you one time the story about, one of the older guys in the service, one of them
uh-huh.
told me, he said, we all started off like you, and then after 10 years, 15 years, one day we looked in the mirror while we were shaving, and we suddenly realized we'd become like them. And we're stuck. And we can't get out. So we go on being like the old guys, and we can't. And I said, I'm not going to be like that. I'm just not going to let that happen. So I got out. At Stanford, all I had to do was go to a rally. There were
mm-hmm.
rallies and meetings and groups, and they needed volunteers to do things, and we used volunteers like any other club you get into, except it had to be 1,000 people instead of 50.
So what were some of the things you volunteered to do?
Oh, just go to demonstrations and
mm-hmm.
Go up to San Francisco and be part of a demonstration, or we did a sit-in at a major building on the campus and held the building for a week.
Wow.
So the police, surrounded the building. Actually, there were police inside the building all the time. There was classified files in there. Part of the strike, part of that sit-in was that the university was doing classified research on defense projects. And we said the university's not supposed to do that. The university is supposed to, do scientific experiments, make the information available to the world, advance humanity, research, all that. You're doing classified weapons research to try to kill people. Does that what Stanford University is supposed to do? And so we sat in the building and stopped the research. And they sent a policeman in, and he sat there by the files. The files were all locked. And he sat in front of them in a chair, leaned back against the file cabinets the whole time we were in there. They, 3 shifts. He'd come and go, night, be different one every 8 hours. And so it was it's like we all got along, and then the police surrounded and said, "Come out, or we'll come in with tear gas, and you'll all go to jail." So we had a heated discussion. I understood why the students in Tiananmen had been killed, by the way, through that, because in that discussion, there are always some people who hold out and say, "No, we're going to be heroes. We'll stay here to the bitter end. Kill us. We'll be martyrs to the cause." And then finally, the most of us, just pushed them out the door and left. But the students in Tiananmen, there were too many, and they couldn't reach that decision, so they were still there when the troops moved in.
What happened in Tiananmen?
That's another story.
Okay.
The Tiananmen story is like. Anyway, so we left. I was in that, and then the strike, the Cambodia strike, when we sent the teams out, to tell people what that was about. And one of us would explain the history of Vietnam. One of us would explain the war in Vietnam. I would be the one who talked about how the American government made decisions that got us into that situation for reasons that hadn't anything to do with what was going on in Vietnam, but had to do with what was going on in bureaucracy in Washington. So we had, we would give different topics as these teachers, they would call them.
Do you recall any interesting people you met, or any stories about them?
Yeah, that's going. I think that's getting off on a tangent. Yes, I did, but it's not.
Okay.